style's different though.
Spending time with us. We're an up and coming platform, so I appreciate it. Really.
No, that's okay. That's how it starts off.
Yeah, so
that's how you're supposed to start it off.
Yeah,
baby. Album Valore. Valore Double O forever. AKA Charles the Blue. Yeah. Come on. Yeah. I like this, nigga. Yeah. Yo, trying to rock this loose. This music ain't the blues. You stupid little fool on a hip-hop school. It's time to show down in front of the crowd. I got the super hype shit. I never talk loud. I like Drake kick, but suckers I hate. When the real fake, yo, I use it for bait. I concentrate. To rock or stick.
But yeah, let me start from the beginning, Take us back to Flatbush 75. How was life in Brooklyn out there?
Well, basically, I mean, at that time, it was really a outside block party, disco type of era.
Mm-hmm.
Hip hop wasn't really totally hip hop today. At that time, like what hip hop is today, it was just being actually started. The birth of it, and it really was the birth of it was going on in the Bronx. And uptown in Harlem. Brooklyn, it was a lot of DJs. They were playing more like disco records and old club records and stuff like that. Basically the 70s hits. Whatever the 70s hits was on the radio. You had DJs coming to the parks. They would come to the parks on certain days, and they would come to what we call block parties, where they have the blocks all blocked off. I don't know if they did that, early in your era where they would block off the blocks. The DJs would come out and play the music and stuff like that. Yeah, we had the block parties where they would cut off the blocks in the summertime. In the wintertime you can't do it because in the wintertime here it's cold weather.
Yeah.
But in the summertime, they would have the block parties and they would bring out the big speakers, and the DJs would play with the two turntables, but it wasn't no scratching and nothing going on. It was basically playing a record after a record. And then eventually they started blending the records. Blending the records together and stuff like that. So you had certain DJs that made a name for themselves coming out to the communities doing that. And then at the same time, you had the graffiti movement. And then at the same time, you had the people coming to the parks dancing. So this is where you begin to really see the formulation of hip-hop, though. Because you had the dancing, you had the graffiti, you had the DJ, and then you had a guy getting on the mic once in a while, announcing the next record, and stuff like that. It really wasn't a constant MC and flow going on. In the 70s, when I first got introduced to what I would say hip-hop is. Now later, when you come into the 80s, what people saw as hip-hop was different because it was sort of already developed. But if you listen to the foundation, if you're looking for the foundation and the birth of it, we grew up in the culture before it was even called hip-hop. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It wasn't even called hip-hop yet. It just was gathering in the neighborhoods, the DJ coming out to the scene, and then everybody, our culture clashing, the black culture clashing. The graffiti, the dancing, the person talking on the mic, and the person blending the records. And if you put that all get together, over a period of time, you got hip-hop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Good Times.
Yeah.
Good Times is a hit. Now you see how they cut it up. Good time, good. They eventually start scratching it up, cutting it up. So they did that to a lot of the records. It would be whatever the hit was, and they felt the vibe, and they had that soul vibe. They start blending it, mixing it up. Or there was an era when they came through with, I don't know if you remember, well, you probably seen them or heard of them, the Disco 45s.
The records?
They're like some long records. Some of them are like 10 minutes long and 7 minutes long.
Yeah.
When the recording industry started making the records that was really emulating the DJs. They made the records longer so they could play the records and people could constantly dance to them in the clubs. And that's when you started getting the longer records. So, between that, you had the blending and then you had the scratching. You had not scratching yet, you had the blending and the chopping up the records. And then later on in the Bronx, they developed the scratching with Theodore, Flash, and after Kool Herc introduced it to the street out there, all of the different reggae, the different records and the reggae feel, because Kool Herc, as you know, is from Jamaica.
Yeah.
And he brought the whole vibe to the Bronx, which was the big speakers and the music being out in the street. He brought that. That really came from Jamaica, because Jamaica was a hot place and they always played music outside. When they give a party in Jamaica, it's outside, number one, and their sound system always was big speakers. So Kool Herc brought that to the Bronx. Mm. And that's their foundation of hip-hop. So when you hear like Grandmaster Flash, the Cold Crush 4, the Fearless 4, that first era of rappers that was on wax, the Treacherous 3, when you hear those guys speak about hip-hop, that's why they always speak about Kool Herc. Because Kool Herc was that guy who brought them speakers out. And then when other people saw that, they started to travel on and on and on and on all around the Bronx and even down to Harlem. So that's when it comes into like the B-boy era, like to the late 70s and the 80s, early 80s, but really like the middle 70s, you got all those guys like the Cold Crush 4 and all those guys. They was performing and getting on the mic. And there's even some MCs that was a little before them. There's a lot of them that I'm not as familiar with. Mm-hmm. But if you talk to like Kool Herc, Flash, and Grandmaster Cass and those guys from those groups, they could tell you the guys who were before that up there, when they was little going to the park, the first guys that was MCing, with the yes, yes, y'all, or to the beat, y'all, da, 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 like more simpler type of flow of MCing at the very beginning. There's a lot of groups that was up there that, never got no recognition because they wasn't on vinyl yet.
Yeah, it was just doing it, wasn't recording it. It was just all ad-lib, yeah.
Yeah, just in the park, just grabbing the microphone, having fun, wiring the system up to the light lamp pole. They might even pay somebody who live on the first floor. Let us plug in. You know what I mean? And sometimes they're still jacking from the pole. They play as long as they could until the police come and shut it down. Brothers gonna always figure out a way to get it on.
Find a way, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that was like the first era, really hip hop. I mean, there's so many stories. Forget it.
So you a fan, going to these spots and these parties, and so when did it, touch you and you said, you know what, let me start dabbing in this in a little bit?
Well, actually, I mean, I always was into the music, listening to the music. And my first introduction to hip-hop would be graffiti and dancing. Because we was all break dancing and top rocking, which is another form of break dancing. Mm-hmm. We was doing that, and the graffiti I was involved in. So that was my first forms of it. And then the music came with it, because the music was always around. It's going to come. You got block parties. You want to go out. You're going to hear the music. And then the fashion also comes involved. The styles, the clothes we were wearing, the stuff like that. That's all part of hip-hop. So that was really my first introduction to it. I would say graffiti and the music and the breakdancing. But how I really got onto the Harlem scene and the Bronx scene, the real foundation of the scratching and the real yes, y'allin' and the MCing was my cousin named Michael Merritt. He had gotten into some trouble and he went to a juvenile home. And the juvenile home was a place called Goshen Annex. So you go to like up in New York, there's a place called Spofford. I don't know if you heard of it.
Nah.
But they mentioned
Just the 1-2, baby. Yeah. MC Ray, what up, man? Good looking, baby. Abu Valor. Valor and Double O forever. AKA Charles the Blue. Yeah, come on. Yeah. I like this, baby. Yeah. Yo, trying to rock and lose. This music ain't the blues, you stupid little fool on the hip-hop school. It's time to show down in front of the crowd. I got the super hype shit, I never talk loud. I like Drake kick, but suckers I hate. When the real fake, yo, I use them for bait. I concentrate, to rock all states. My game is fame because I'm great. My gun's nickel-plated, ripping up stages. Do I got a lot of rhymes? Yo, I got pages, this is music town. You get beat down, it's found now. It's F-Ace Clown, don't tell me to chill. Right you will, have overlord, I'm out for the kill, this is my world. Trying to rock and lose. Yo, trying to rock and lose. Trying to rock and lose. Trying to rock and lose. Yo, trying to rock and lose.
Shit's about to get ill. Try to rock you loose against these three loose screws. Rain for Lord J, red on the 1s and 2s. What more can you ask for? Up on tour days in phase 2, a painting on your back wall. Wild styles galore, that's for sure, we're keeping it raw. Furthermore, whack MCs, we've murdered them all. With words that stand tall, together with music to brawl. Suckers are left mauled, I'm appalled by these so-called artists. Smart asses who bullshit the hardest, making themselves easy targets. Your carcass against the masters. For starters, you first heard us on your ghetto blasters. You little bastards, you've got no hope. You might as well elope to someplace remote. You can't stay afloat, rain's gonna rock your boat.
Trying to rock and lose. Yo, trying to rock and lose.